Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Brian. And it's been nice to meet you, Rachel, and reconnect with you, Michael. Um, I am really excited to talk to you all, and I'll make one invitation. If you were mildly prepared to be on video or can turn on your video, that would be awesome. If not, no big deal. I just want to see sort of my gallery view populate a little bit if anyone's out there and interested in joining the four of us. And my style is excellent. Kevin, thank you. My style is a little bit fluid and it's a lot more conversation based. Oh, I'm gonna mess this up. Daraja, thank you. Um, I think the best use of time, especially in today's world, we're all on webinars, we're all on Zoom calls, there's a million workshops. We're able to attend workshops that maybe we would have never attended because everything's going virtual. And I am not really a talk at a room of people person. I am much more of a what is sitting in the room, what are the conversations in the room. Oh, nice, more people popping on here. Brian, previous speaker, hyped to join in your ranks. I'm more of a what kind of questions are sitting in the room, and what conversations can we have that would be the most impactful and valuable for you all. And so I'll go a little bit off of what Brian, how the introduction, and we were talking a little bit about sort of the visuals of what comes next, right? We, on average, we're blindsided, right? Let's say late February, early March, we kind of all got knocked either completely off our feet sideways or onto our back. And depending on what industry you're in, you may have been sort of held on your back. Let's think hospitality industry. There's unbelievable pressure around the challenges that are happening there. But even if you worked in an office and having to adjust to working remotely, or if you had your own business and your entire business strategy had to shift because your clients need different things. My dad has an acupuncture business. He was considering closing it for a while, but not being able to practice accelerated that conversation for him, right? And that's outside of hospitality or restaurants, but it's a business that relies on physical contact. And so the conversation Brian and I had was around this notion. I don't know who said it first, but I was thinking about Phoenix, the Phoenix, and I think Brian was like, wow, like that's been on my mind as well. And where that came from for me, and if you know sort of the story of a Phoenix, it rises from the ashes, right? And right now, my assessment is, and with my clients and just taking in what the internet's sharing, people, that the world is burning. Businesses are metaphorically burning, right? And we're still in deep in crisis mode. There's stimulus checks that are coming in. There's all sorts of attempts at slowing down the challenge, but we're going to be looking at this for 6, 18, 24 months minimum, right? And some businesses are going to come out of this and snap back because they have the resources. Some businesses will come out of this and snap back because it's what they want to do. A lot of businesses are going to come out of this with a completely different perspective on their offer, on what their clients need. And the sad part is a lot of businesses aren't going to come back at all, right? And so as an executive coach, as someone who works with leaders and entrepreneurs, my question is always, how do I support people in that recovery, in making the adjustment? And what can that look like? And so this sort of Phoenix strategy, the concept is really, if you're a business owner, or even if you work at an organization, or you have your own personal life that you're thinking about, it's looking at this and saying, what are the things that are impacting me right now? And what changes might I make regardless of what happens down the road? You know, when we open up sort of the economy, which is an interesting thing to talk about because the economy is still running. It's not closed, it's just changed, right? Or when we open up gathering places, you know, what is that going to look like? So whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're thinking about your personal life, right? Or you're thinking about a business that you run, really starting to ask yourself certain questions around what does the future look like? Because it's not the same. And one of the things that I was thinking about today is what are the emerging norms, not new norms, because we'll have some old norms, but what are some of the sort of these emerging norms, like all of this teleconnectivity, virtual connectivity? So I'm going to jump kind of quickly into this idea of this space of what questions are out there. When you saw the, maybe my blip, or you got the email from the business center and this idea of Phoenix strategy, what's on people's minds? It's Monday. I don't know anyone else got a little drink, but this is not water. This is mezcal on ice. I'm taking happy hour seriously these days, even though I didn't before. So I would love to hear, and if there aren't questions, I'll keep talking, but I'd love to hear sort of what kind of impact have people had, what have they been experiencing, and what's sort of out there in the group around, are there changes that are being made? Are there big questions that people are sitting with that maybe they want to talk through? And I can see a small group of people, but I know there's some people either on the phone or also just not videoing, which is totally okay.
Jess talked about last week, which I thought really resonated with me in the time that's passed, is she said, look, we all only have the same number of hours in a day. We all have these various obligations to family or business or your dreams or your kind of entertainment and recreation, that kind of stuff. She said that what she's been talking about often with her businesses is, now that you have to take stock of everything and have been given this time to do so, where are you going to put your attention when you do come back? So she had this, I think, pretty interesting image that I thought you would enjoy as well, where it's these 4 trees and you only have so many leaves, right? So which trees are you going to put the leaves on when the Septembers and Octobers and Novembers roll around? Have you enjoyed increased time with your family, or have you realized that dream you've always had, you didn't have time to think about, now has become a priority for you? And as things start to shift, that's where I think a lot of people are thinking about their Phoenix strategy. So what does the bird look like when it starts to rise from the ashes? It's probably a little bit different than the way when it started catching fire.
I think first, Jess is awesome. If you got to hear her speak or her, then you know that's the reality. And she just wrote a book, and she has such a powerful way of thinking about things. And I love that analogy of the trees. I think just to share a couple examples, and again, if questions come up or if people want to sort of use their business or what's going on in their mind as a live example, we can talk about it. But this acupuncture practice, my dad's business, I'm currently supporting him and making a shift to offering virtual health healing and health support, right? So consulting people, health advocacy, and things like that. So like for him, it's the physical space is closing, but he's leaning into and opening up a different way to connect with his book of patients and offer support in a way that he was before. I mean, when you go to a doctor, one part is that the literal technical support you get, but the other part is that conversational element, the self-care piece. And so that's a personal example. My home office is going to be much more evolved after this. I'm currently house shopping because living in an apartment without a yard is not appealing. But there are examples of really interesting business shift also. So if you're in DC, which I imagine many of you are, or are based, are usually here if you're home or somewhere else, but coffee shops, how have coffee shops changed, right? So if you're a Compass Coffee fan, their cafes are closed, but they've been making hand sanitizer like crazy, right? Because they have the equipment and a lot of the resources. Same with liquor businesses. Most distilleries in DC are making hand sanitizer, right? And that's part of their shift. I think another really interesting one is La Colombe, which is another cafe. It's based in Philly. It's a roastery. I feel like within 48 hours, they closed all their cafes, and they also like aggressively accelerated you can like order coffee for delivery, not cups of coffee, but like the coffee that you like, their beans, their ground, you can order it in different blends. And so when I think about sort of where are you going to put your effort and energy, right now we're seeing real-time reactions to businesses where they're putting their effort and energy in survival mode. And it will be interesting to see sort of as we just continue leaning into this and shifting what our experience is, what elements of survival mode stick what elements sort of shift back? Will there be wholesale changes, or will there be sort of a blend? Will businesses be prepared for something like this if it comes up again? They say, oh, we did this before, so we're just going to snap back to survival mode and we have the infrastructure. So I think that is a really good question. And the time with family is really interesting. I don't know what everyone's social distancing makeup is. Everyone's got a different setup. Some people are by themselves. Some people are with their significant others. Some people are with roommates. Some people have kids. But I do think we're learning a lot about ourselves individually. And I'll tell you the one thing for me, and this is my own setup. I've had dinner with my son, who's 16 months old now, every single night since March 16th. And no one can pay me money to take that away. Like that'll never change. You know, and like my work priority, like if you put a pressure point on that work priority coming out of this, it's a non-negotiable, right? And it's something that I enjoyed and I loved before, but having done it every night and seeing him every night and all the, like what that's done for me and what that's done for him, that's definitely something out of this moment that no matter what happens, it becomes a priority. And I'd like to say it was a priority before, but I felt before that, well, I see him a lot and all these things, and like, you know, I just felt that there was more flexibility in life. But sort of with this experience, there's been this, that's sort of a line. And with clients, the same thing, by the way, in a different way. Before, I thought that I had this experience where it was really important for me to provide time to clients outside of, let's say, my monetary offer. And some consultants will tell you don't do this, by the way. But for me, I've gotten so much value in giving them a little bit extra time during this crisis. Because I coach, I'm an advisor, I'm a mentor. So I've basically opened my door to people. And the types of conversations and dialogues that we've had have been a lot more powerful, a lot deeper, a lot more humanistic in many ways. And so I do think that's a really great sort of prompt from Jess's conversation and what you just highlighted here, Brian. I would love to hear, and we need some participation because I don't want to talk for an hour. I'll bore myself, and I know I'll bore people on the call, but I would love to hear, what are some things that people are learning about themselves or doing these days that you want to keep with you, that you want to bring forward? And don't make me call on people. I can sit here for a long time being quiet. It's part of my coaching power. I can pick up the people that are on video.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, okay. So thank you for sharing that and for being so candid. I totally understand what you meant about being able to have dinner with your son, and that connected with me because that's how I feel. As you know, probably like most of the folks on this call, I'm a small business owner, and I always feel like, let me just go to one more, let me just have one more client discussion or make one more delivery or do one more thing to try to, close a deal or what have you. But I oftentimes have found myself being in conversation, maybe at the dinner table, and not being fully present. And what this time has allowed me to do is be fully present with my family, to just really experience things in a different way, and also to prioritize work so that I'm working more efficiently and learning how to better connect with my clients so that I'm meeting their needs and making them a priority in a very different way, serving their needs and also finding ways to, fulfill my own interests, and so that we both come out winners. So that's my COVID wonderful story.
I love that. And can I ask you two questions?
Yeah.
One, it says yo next to your phone or your audio. So could you share your name?
So I go by Yoko. My full name is Yolanda, but everybody
Okay, Yoko. Great. So thank you, Yoko. And then two, if you're interested, what kind of business do you have? Because I'm always curious what types of businesses and how people are adjusting.
I have a gourmet gifting company, and so we create lots of gourmet items, but we package them in a way so they're perfect for you to treat yourself or to treat someone that you love or that you work with. And what we've been doing during this time here is creating custom gift packs that say things like, Mom, I miss you. Pop, we miss you. You know, I'm having a Netflix party and snacks are provided. And we'll ship it out to folks and their friends will receive them. You can all click in and watch a Netflix party together. And then the other thing that we do is we make boozy flavored lollipops. And so,
Boozy flavored lollipops?
Yeah, and I shouldn't
So
say
good.
they actually
So
do.
good.
Okay, so
They actually
message
have,
me.
you know. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said, you just sent me a message with the link, so I know what's
Okay,
going on.
gotcha, yeah. So yeah, that's what we do.
That I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think the reason why I'm curious is because every business is adjusting, you know, differently, because there's different constraints, there's different customer base, there's different offers. And I think it's helpful to contextualize. What came up when I was listening to you share was a conversation I had with actually an executive from Apple a long time ago when I worked at Apple. And we started talking about work-life balance. And he said candidly that it was a crock of shit. And that if you try and balance, that you're always sort of giving up, like you always feel like you're sacrificing. If you try to balance, you feel like you're not working the right amount. If you try and do, you know, if you work too much and you say, I'm trying to balance, you're not being with your family enough. And what he said was, and this is what I heard from you, and it might be different, but he talked about work-life focus. Mm-hmm. And the way he defined it was, when you're with your family, focus on your family. When you're doing the work, focus on the work, so that, or in whatever other domains, by the way, in your life. If working out is a huge thing for you, when you're working out, focus on working out. If you have a creative outlet, maybe you're a painter or a writer, focus on those things when you're doing them, so that whatever that activity or that engagement is gets all of you and not part of you.
Yep.
Because
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we do things now like complete a work day and then actually play Scrabble after dinner. I mean, I know that might sound kind of like over the top, but it's like, wow, no. We can do things. So yeah.
I think that's great. So I really appreciate sort of you sharing and contextualizing in your world and your work.
Oh, my pleasure.
And also, I have a lot to learn, so I appreciate that. I'm gonna read a comment here. Kevin, this time has showed me that I need to be more mindful. I would like to begin AMS. Is that, I don't know if that's a typo or if that's something that I don't know, because I don't know everything. Continue meditation and yoga practices. Do you want to elaborate on that, or did that summarize? That summarized. I got a head shake. This is something.
It's summarized it, and AMS is supposed to be and. So sorry about that.
No worries. My typos have increased dramatically, mostly because I think my fingers are exhausted from being on the computer so much. My reaction, and I just want to share, I think there's been an intense level of introspection in the world, because we are almost forced to, but also because we're facing these unbelievable challenges that we haven't really faced, right? And so I think one of them is this sort of existential question around the safety and health and security of our lives because of a virus. But the other is, so many things change so quickly that we're asking ourselves a lot more questions, you know. And a lot of clients and even friends have really talked a lot about what you shared here, sort of this mindfulness, whether it's meditation or yoga, or everyone sort of finds mindfulness in different ways. Could be reading, could be a mantra, but there is this sort of movement towards these self-care practices, because you're not going for your 20-minute walk to and from work, or you're not getting up and going to lunch like you would when you worked in an office, or if there isn't this, if, you know, maybe Yoko and I are kind of in a similar bucket. I do a lot of client meetings, and what that does is I'm going from one coffee shop to another, and sometimes I'm walking, sometimes I'm on a scooter, sometimes I'm driving, but there's a movement, there's a spatial movement that happens. And I'll go back to my dad, who's an acupuncturist. He also teaches Tai Chi and Qigong, and, you know, we talk a lot about traditional Chinese medicine, and something that gets talked about a lot is sort of the stagnation of energy, stagnant energy when it sits in your body, and how it compounds and how it creates it can create a lot of unhealthy things, whether they're chronic pains or whether it's maybe you have, sick or something. They look at, is your energy stagnant? And we used to talk about how we would sit too much as a culture in the United States, and it's kind of exponential because you're not getting up and walking past a person at a desk, or going to an event in the afternoon. And so I think, Kevin, sharing this is really, really important, and it's very helpful. And questions are, in my mind, and I ask myself these: how do I hold on to some of these changes? Right? If you find a mindful practice, how do you hold on to it as things maybe become less closed and less distanced? And what value do you find in some of the shifts, and how do you hold on to them? So I shared my dinner practice. I know, Yoko, you shared some of the things that you're learning about yourself and your family. But I think one of the bigger questions over time, and this goes back to the sort of Phoenix strategy conversation, is how do you hold on to these practices? How do you carry them forward? How do you say, this wasn't just a moment of sort of high pressure where I created this or learned this, but I want to bring it with me to make it something sustainable? What other questions are out there? Or thoughts? I can wax poetic also. I feel like the number, we're at 16 people now, so maybe someone joined. We can pick on someone else. I'm gonna restate this. What are things that have been happening, or that what kind of shifts have you made during this time that you have found impactful or helpful that you want to carry forward? They say no matter, when the government opens and all this stuff changes, what are things that you want to bring forward?
I think one of the things for me that's been interesting is trying to plan my time better rather than just kind of going through my day with just a vague to-do list. It's being very strategic about my time and making time for the things then, like with Jessica's metaphor from last week of the trees, that I otherwise am kind of ignoring or not cultivating as much as I want to, like reading or social times or professional goals or whatever it is, but being much more strategic about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in complete agreement. I think that the level of intentionality that people are forced to have now is we'll use the buzzword, is unprecedented, right? This is the word of definitely the year, even though we're only 4 months in, right? You have to think about what you're doing in your everyday life, but also be more consequent around things that you would have taken for granted, like going outside, like walking through a neighborhood, walking down a street. The level of intentionality at a macro and micro level is huge. And I was talking to someone who spent some time in Thailand, lived in Tokyo, lived in Europe, lived in South America. And for people that have traveled or people that study other cultures, one of the things that came up in our conversation, and this was earlier, end of last week, was the speed at which we operate in the United States is at a very fast clip. And the speed at which other cultures operate, while they might be very energetic and vibrant, and they might accomplish a lot, the speed at which they operate is much different, right? The speed of what's happening in Italy or Spain or Greece or France is much slower than the speed in the United States. And the same in a lot of Asian countries. And it's not that they're not doing a lot, it's just that the energy is different. And I think something that people are experiencing, like I'll use myself as an example, run from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, coffee shop to coffee shop, office to office. And I think that we're seeing that things can continue even when we slow down to ask a question, or we slow down and say, do I need to do this thing? Or we slow down and say, well, what is involved in doing this thing? Like today, my dad had to go to the dentist to get something done with his tooth. And the level of anxiety that he took on and the thought process that he had to go through, he didn't just go to the dentist. He had to think about, do I have gloves? Do I have masks? What am I wearing when I go to the dentist? Who else is at the dentist's office? And then when he was in there, right? Like the level of thought and layers is causing us to just look at things differently. And I think for many people that will stick in different ways. But intentionality and being selective is really, Thank you for sharing that, Rachel. I couldn't agree more. WDCEP, do you have only because I'm like this, do you have what's your name?
Sorry, I must be logged in under my work account. Sorry about
Okay, no sweat.
that. So, I'm Chad with WDC, stands for Washington DC Economic Partnership.
Yeah, I haven't met you. I've talked to Kevin a couple times.
Okay, great, great.
Challenge I'm facing in short-term tasks, i.e. survival versus long-term strategy. Will our services be relevant in 12 plus months? That's a really good question. I can jump into it, or do you have an example, or do you want to elaborate? Or?
No, I think it's a challenge in terms of right now. It's just kind of information overload, and you just kind of, like you said, you're just reacting to the world around you, and then doing that again in 6 months, 12 months, you're just going to find yourself not really planning for the future. And
yeah,
a lot of it could be project management, it could just be time-based focus, but that's how I personally am feeling right now. Just overwhelmed. And you're just moving forward one step at a time, but not strategically. Just, oh, here's an email, let me respond to it. Here's an issue, let me respond to it. And you just keep going down that path, like I said. And then the concern is, okay, am I going to turn around in 6 months and be like, oh, I'm not where I should be?
I mean, I think that's an incredibly valid concern. It's a concern I think that almost everyone has in their own jobs and businesses. I'm in crisis mode, and I'm doing what I can and what we need to do to manage. Like you said today, I'm just using what you're talking about. But what is the long-term plan? And one of the reactions that I have is if there's a lack of leadership at any level, at an organizational level, at a community level, at a state or federal level, when there's a lot of confusion around timing and how long is this going to last or what's the plan, my encouragement, and I think part of this sort of Phoenix strategy concept, is start to formulate what is your, let's say, 6 to 12 month plan, whether it's a personal plan, whether it's a professional plan, whether it's with the information that you have today as an employee, right? What can you start formulating a plan around? Because what it does, we didn't discuss boundaries yet, but we'll talk about that, I promise. But what it does is it starts to create a little bit of, like, not composure, but you can breathe just a little bit. So I'll give you a personal example. My wife and I have spent 45 days total in 2020 in our apartment that we rent in DC. And we had a voluntary trip for a month in February. So 30 days at home in January, 30 days not in February. I'm obviously rounding. And then we were home for 2 weeks in March before we came to my parents in Maryland, right? And for weeks, there was a lot of anxiety around what's the plan? What are we going to do? Are we moving back? Are we not moving back? And then we said, let's make a 6 month plan. Okay, we're not going to go back to our apartment. We're going to stay at my parents. We're going to look for a home. Like, we started to let's make a longer term plan for ourselves. We still have to deal with daily shit, right? But to the extent that you have any control, and we all have a little bit of control, I would say starting to look at that. And the other piece is there's a concept that's really uncomfortable for founders and entrepreneurs and startups, which is slow down to go fast. And the best way I can describe that is if you can envision yourself running at full speed, which is what this kind of feels like. We're running at full speed, trying to figure out what the hell's going on, and trying to make a hard left or a hard right, you're going to literally break your ankle or fall over. Like, it's just not going to work, right? So we're moving so quickly to try and resolve all the things that are happening. And in a full sprint, we can't really change directions. If you do, it's a really gentle, long curve, which doesn't really respond to the fact that this situation is changing daily and weekly. So if you have the capacity within your organization, or if you can push your organization to slow down, or if you have your own business and you can challenge yourself to slow down and say, I got to slow down a little bit, so I have the agility and mobility to think about things, and I have the agility and mobility to make the little shifts that would make this a more manageable experience. I don't know if that's helpful, because I know you work for someone else, but like, if you can challenge yourself, or you can challenge your peers and be like, hey, let's slow down for a second. Like, literally, let's just slow down and think about this conversation. You know, what does this mean for today? 1 week, 1 month, 3 months? What are we talking about here? right? Easier when you're an individual owner, or if you're the boss, way easier. If you're not, or if you have a partner that's 50-50, you know, there's a little bit of enrolling people in this concept. But I think that might get at a little bit the short term versus long term. Will our services be relevant? Yeah.
If I could chime in here too, I think that one of the unique elements of this craziness is that we're being forced to go slow at this point. When you think about just the tenor of the conversation 5 weeks ago when we started doing these happy hours, everyone was 90 miles an hour. And I mean, the questions in the chat field were all over the place. We were trying to figure out who was actually hosting and please mute your mic and all this other stuff. It was kind of mayhem. And I think that we have gotten a certain level of clarity since we started out on this journey. And I think that in a couple of the organizations that I'm a part of, both at the university and outside, we're being forced to think about that, to try to control the things that we can, not worry too much about the things we can't, but think 1 month out, 3 months out, 6 months out, knowing that the circumstances very well might change again. But there's no use right now saying, okay, I'm going to do an event on September 21st, because who knows? Now, can I start laying the groundwork so that I could execute that if we can do that? Sure. But I think that we've all been forced, now that we've gotten out of the initial shell shock, to slow things down a little bit, to maybe reevaluate what is possible. And then in some ways, just to allow yourself the possibilities in a couple different areas that then you could backfill if you had to, you can execute an event in less than a month. Would you want to? No. Have I done it before? Yeah. And so I'm kind of organizing my thoughts such that I'm going to do enough kind of coalition building now while things are slower. And then if we have to ramp things up later, then I'll try to do it at that point. But I think that to use Adam's analogy of the wayward runner, we've all been forced to slow down a little bit so that we can move laterally and survey our options, I think.
Right, we got a ex-footballer here, so mobility, agility, speed, and force are definitely a part of the vocabulary. And listening to you, Brian, it kind of doubled back on the initial question for me also. Ask whoever your stakeholders and customers are, ask them what they need and what are they thinking about over the next 3 to 6 months. That's going to be your best indicator. You know, will our services be relevant in 12 plus months? Ask we all have customers, we all have stakeholders, whether you work for someone, whether you have whether you have your own business, engaging them in a conversation about what do they need, what would they love to see, what are they thinking about, is going to be the best indicator for coming back. And back to the event thing, like if you plan an event and no one, even though you could plan an event and no one feels comfortable going to an event, you're only going to know that by talking to your customers. Or whoever the stakeholders are. But that's something that I've been thinking a lot about for my own work and with clients. How do we figure out what to do? Ask your customers. What would they love to see from you? What do they need from you? You know, and do you have existing offers that you can morph to say, look, we could give us a week. We're going to repurpose some of this stuff and we'll be up and running with X, Y, and Z, you know, or give us a month, whatever. But I would emphasize that as well. Enid, I would also like to hear how you say no. How I say no personally, I say no. How do you say no? I think overall it depends. Enid, are you a business owner? Are you saying no to clients? Are you saying no to a boss?
I'm actually saying no. I've done a lot of work in the social justice arena in the past, and now I'm working primarily in healthcare environment and, and renewable energy. But I still every now and then get tapped by some of those clients that I did pro bono work for in the past, or that I did at low or below, way below market rate. And it was just, so when you asked about the situational analysis, what it is I've learned to really avoid, I have no time, first of all, because I'm dealing with healthcare clients. But you know, just in terms of, you know, I had already planned to kind of phase out that part of my business where I was, you know, I'm very selective of where I, you know, do pro bono work these days. Like I work, by example, with the DC Healthcare Alliance Network. That's somebody, you know, for free. I mean, you know, I provide them with consultation. But then again, there's an intersect with my existing clients. So it makes sense. But, you know, and I'm involved in some political things, but, you know, I still have those ghosts from the past, if you will. So I want to know how to like keep them, like, you know, stay in the grave, you know, get the garlic out.
I mean, I think that there are a handful of approaches overall, regardless of who you're talking to. Clarity, honesty, short and simple. Whoever you're talking to, if it's ghosts from the past, right? Being clear in what your focus is now, and that you either don't have the capacity or you don't have that same offer that you made in the past. And if you're going to say no to people, you have to also be prepared for the response. That the response might be complete understanding. The response might be frustration. The response might be disappointment. But there's, as you say no, and it might take time to build confidence, or it might not. You might already be at 100% confidence. But being confident in why you're saying no and what you're serving and the reason behind it, right? So if I say yes to everything, by default, I'm saying no to a lot of things because I will run out of space, right? And so I say, just like you were talking about, I say no to things that if I had unlimited time and resources, I would say yes to. But I don't. No one does. Maybe Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos, who can say yes and then just say, here's $1 billion, figure it out. You know, Richard Branson has like 7 companies. Jeff Bezos has, I think, maybe 4. Elon Musk has, I think, 5 or 6. It's easy to say yes when you can pay other people to do it for you. And I'm not dogging them. They've generated a lot of success. Love them or hate them. I think it's a really good question. And in leadership, this is a very common thread. People who are the most effective and who are the most impactful leaders are typically people who are very good at saying no. And it's not just for the sake of saying no. It's saying no because, and I'm going off what you said, Enid, you know, this is not a part of my offer, or this is not a part of my focus. And if I say yes to it, it's distracting. Or if I say yes to it, it's, you know, takes the resources that I need, that I want to put towards where I'm at right now.
Enid, one strategy that I heard somewhere along the way for somebody who was struggling with this very same issue, where they were getting a lot of requests and they felt like it was this emotional tug of war every time they responded, was to have a couple of template emails that they don't have to be fully complete, but even if you just have the template out there that say, listen, thank you so much for your request at this time, you know, due to the crisis, or whatever you want to say, like I have to be very conscious of my bandwidth because I'm trying to save my business or whatever. And then that way you can personalize it and it takes some of the sting out of it, just to say, okay, this is email 3A that I need to send out, as opposed to it being, oh no, I'm letting Adam down because he asked me for a favor and I said no.
And to tack onto that, if you get very similar requests from a very similar group of people, even if they're past clients, if you have the energy, bandwidth, or interest, find someone that is interested in taking those clients on, and then you can say, I'd love to introduce you to this person. So like it does several things. One, if you have the fortune, the benefit of people who are seeking your services or help out, even if they're rates that don't apply to you anymore, whatever you want to call it, there are people that don't get those inbounds, you know, or maybe don't get them as much as you might be. And so being able to be not a provider, but being able to be a lead gen for someone else puts a shit ton of goodwill out into the world. And with that person, you're like, hey, I keep on getting these inbounds. It's not my thing anymore. Do you have space in your book for work? I'd be happy to make intros as they come my way. That person is not going to say no. They won't say no to that.
Thank you.
And I think to Brian's point, it softens your no. It's like, can't be me right now, but I got someone if you're interested. And if they say they're not interested, then they don't really, 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 really need the help.
Yeah, I need it also, as you well know, better than anybody probably, there are a lot of people out there who are always looking for something for free, which I think for some reason tends to affect the services industry a little bit more often than the product industry. And so I think that in some cases that unless you do eventually say no, they're going to keep asking. And I think that that's something that this crisis has given everybody the kind of a get out of jail free card to say, look, I can't spend all my time with free clients right now because you know what? I mean, you don't even have to explain yourself.
The virus who shall not be named.
Yeah. The other thing too, just as a resource, a couple people asked for book recommendations recently. Forgive me if I've recommended to some of you before, but there's a book called Accounting for the Number Phobic by Dawn Fotopoulos. And I am not a numbers person, as Mike can attest to, I think better than anyone. She broke down what she calls the pricing vortex of death or something like that, which she maps out if you keep accepting a lower rate or cut the price on your product, how you end up spending all your time servicing lower end customers, and that they'll never pay full price for your services, and actually you end up working harder and making less money. So there's a whole set of resources. She actually hired an animator from Disney to bring some of her points to life. So dum-dums like me can figure it out what she's talking about. But when it comes to pricing strategy, I think she has supreme advice about that and that very thing, because they're never going to pay your full freight if they get accustomed to paying the lower amount. And they're going to keep coming back unless you figure out how to spend that energy on attracting more full fee clients as opposed to servicing a bunch of half fee clients, if that makes sense.
This topic has got my brain firing because I just go back to like the Apple example. Apple has premium products, they have premium pricing. All of their competitors are vying for the sort of low end market. And Apple's, I think, still the most valuable company by market cap in the world, right? And it's based on offering a premium service and product and saying, this is what we do, this is how we operate, and people buy it. What other questions are floating out there? This is way better, by the way. It would have gotten super boring, so I appreciate the questions that have come in. Because also, as a coach, and this is why speaking is interesting for me, or talking to groups. As a coach, I do very little talking in my conversations because I don't know all of the challenges or all the questions that are in the room. And so I greatly appreciate the questions that have come up so far. We have 10-ish minutes, 12 minutes, if we take it right to 6. And I want to be respectful of people's time. Are there any other questions or thoughts out there around sort of what are some of the challenges that maybe are unique to what's going on, or what are some things that we're learning or you're learning that you'd like to carry forward through the crisis and beyond? I know there are questions out there.
All right, heck, I'll go.
Yes.
So for everyone on the call, I have I had two businesses. I had two businesses. One I had to shut down due to COVID, and the other one is booming like I've never seen before, and I didn't think I could do it remotely. So the two businesses were as follows, and they're both, not fun nor sexy businesses. One was basically catering to Amazon. I had a couple warehouse spaces out in Elk Ridge, Maryland, upon which I employed my team of moms, as I would call it. Yes, I only hire moms. They are phenomenal talent, so I recommend it to everybody. And then it was a lot of part-time workers. That one we sold on a daily basis, anywhere from like 10,000 weekly basis, 10,000 to 15,000. The pop sockets on your phone and stuff. Like stuff like that. So it was just kind of an operations play. And when COVID hit and catering to Amazon and Shopify and everybody else, that really hurt us. More importantly, I shut it down quite early, and because I just didn't want to take the risks, and more importantly, health is more important. First thing. Second business is a boat business, which I've had forever, and it's booming now more than ever in Florida. And for everyone who doesn't know, I'm living in DC. So doing that it's been, Adam talked about like, hey, what's this? How is your business going to transform? I never thought I could buy and sell and consign boats online, but I've done it. My question for Adam is as follows. As Amazon is increasing and e-commerce is increasing, I'm still skeptical about whether to reopen or to double down on this effort as it currently is versus involving more robotics for health reasons and efficiency reasons and everything else. And secondly, it's on the consumer services end, which boating is a luxury good. Let's not, this is not essential by any means. How do I continue to provide customer service virtually that can be meaningful and impactful, or impactful and useful, as you mentioned earlier on? Because part of being impactful is I need to show them how to use the boat on the water. Can't necessarily do that on a Zoom call, right? So I would love everybody's thoughts, and also I share that to show you that, look, we're going through it too. The reason we put these calls together is to show you, hey, I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not impervious to the nature of COVID either. But with all these calls, it's given me a rush assurance that we'll get through it. And the timeline aspect is even more crucial. So I'll offer that up for the group.
So I want to parse out your questions. Was there a question about the Amazon business, or there's no question about the Amazon business?
Yeah, I mean, the question about the Amazon business is, do I start it again? Because they're asking,
Got it.
They're asking to start, right? And I'm like, hey, I don't know, because I don't want to put health risks,
Understood.
But I know people need goods.
So I have sort of three things that are coming to mind. One is actually an indirect question about like this, or a comment that you made, which was, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what is going to happen. And I just want to share on this call, because I think it's super important. There's no one in my life that I can go to and ask, what did you do the last time this happened? And I'm very fortunate. I have two grandparents who are 96. They have seen a lot. And I can't go and ask them, what was it like when this happened in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s? And this question about the crystal ball the comment about the crystal ball really sparked something I've been thinking about. The more people you can talk to about how they're processing, the more business owners you can talk to, the more founders, entrepreneurs, anyone that you can talk to about how are you processing what's going on, I would say the better information you have and the more resources you have mentally. So the calls like this are crazy powerful for that reason. We are going through a very high rate of iterative learning and group learning, because we're all making mistakes together. We're all making decisions together in ways where we're learning what works, what doesn't work. So I just want to call that out, because there is no crystal ball. That's completely right, Michael. The thing with a boat, how to use a boat, that came to my mind is this is a really interesting opportunity to ask and look at what are methodologies out there that you would have never employed in your business. Infographics, animated videos, all sorts of stuff around what are really kind of fun and creative ways to connect with your potential customers or existing customers that you may have never thought you would have to do. And you can't shoot video, right? And like Fiverr, Upwork are great resources. I saw someone tweet the other day, what's going to happen with the next season of TV when you can't get together and shoot the whole season, or shoot like what's going to happen with the fall release of movies or whatever next season would be filming right now, right? And someone commented, boom in animation, boom in any computer generated content. So as a business, I think similar things. If you need to create content for customers, what is that visual, digital version? And it's more inexpensive now than ever to do anything animated. So that could be interesting, I think. And that's just my initial reaction. You can hit me up. We'll talk more about it. but I got 5 minutes and I want to talk about the Amazon piece. That's really tough. And the closest example I have to that is my brother has been in the food industry since he was 18, and he's older than me. He's 49. He'll be 49 in August. I don't want to age him in advance, but he'll be 49 soon. He's been in the food industry for almost 30 years. And he has a catering business, and he has a bacon and sausage business, a product business, and he's the cook at a school. So he's essentially got 3 businesses in an industry that is shut down. And the logistics of him working and continuing to make offers is very complicated. And so I'll just share where he's at right now and say, I don't have an answer for you, but are there ways for you to approach this differently? So the first thing is, he is looking at using a kitchen at a corporate office that has no employees coming in. They have 4 employees at a corporate headquarters that typically has thousands of employees. And he's looking at preparing meals and driving them to Baltimore and getting sponsors to pay for the meals and then drive them to Baltimore and give them to people. Right now it's 24 and under LGBTQI community who are living on the street. Not revenue generating, right? But it's letting him do the thing that he loves and the work that he wants to do. And it's creating an outcome for a community, right? So if you sold a product or service, your outcome was someone got what they wanted, you made money. So if there's an itch or a response for your business, what types of outcomes can you generate if you want to open that up? And I would say with these employees, the sort of the mom workforce you've got, or not mom, they are moms, can you ship product to them? And they do everything, and like without having a distribution, can it go product to them and from them to product? Because there's data around sort of the half-life of a virus and things like that. Like, are there ways for you to continue generating revenue and enabling you to continue paying people in this like insane time? If you had a great distribution channel, do you say we can distribute PPEs, personal protective equipment? You know, if you've got the supply, we can distribute it, right? I think that that might be an interesting play. But bringing people together in close proximity is tough. And I might say, if my non-medical, professional opinion from a data standpoint would say that is probably not a good strategy for some time. But I honestly think, like, could you send the product to people and they distribute it? Like, that would be very interesting.
Yeah,
you know, it's almost
like
my
target employees, I always target the following people. So I was raised by a single mom. So I'm always like, oh, how can I get moms who want to spend a disproportionate amount of time with their children, and rightfully so, the opportunity to still find meaningful work in the ways that they're doing it. So my team of moms kind of do everything that I just really suck at doing. And then in terms of packing and the operation itself, it's like how I did growing up. It's all part-time high school workers. So it's like, hey, like I played sports, I get hungry, I don't really have all the money in the world. I can go lift things, I can go do this, and you can come in and make good, honest, above minimum wage pay. And at that point, that's the reason that I'm having this dilemma of saying, okay, I could open because I know I can deliver this. On the flip side, there's this health aspect, and more importantly, you know, I'm not a massive business. I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to throw at all the PPE equipment needed to keep people safe, nor do I have it to invest in some really cool robot that people are buying. So there's always tension about how to, and this is for everyone on the call, is I'm going through it like you all, how do I make a pivot to keep this business alive so I can keep more people employed?
Yeah.
Right.
So this is my brain operating in real time. Moms with able-bodied kids who are in high school or higher, because there are more 16 to 22-year-olds at home with their family or their parent than there have been probably at any time in the history, like modern history. And if we talk about the United States, this is very unusual. Like in the United States, we have this, you're 18 years old, you go to college, you get a job, you live by yourself, you don't come back, right? So like the amount of multi-generational houses at this today is way different than if you were to do this a month ago. And so with your network of moms, is your college student home? You know, like you all want to make you want to make some mint on the side during this insane time? I'll send you my big boxes. You got person one who will do whatever the concern is of like the bigger labor. And you got person two, again, whoever that is. And then the last thing is, my wife is like 10 times stronger than me. So don't underscore the strength of a woman if she's interested in taking on whatever.
Oh, I'm not.
I know. I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. Like you just never know. So throw it out to your group, you know, with businesses that are under duress or under pressure or making strategic decisions to shift their operations. I think one of the strongest things you can do is say, what ideas do you have? What ways could we tackle this together? How could we move this forward? And see what comes from however many people, 5, 10, 15, 20 people, and see where the ideas come. And if it's quiet, be like, here's one thing that I'm floating. How do we ship product to you and then get it to customers so that there's not all this interaction, and then see what the group hits you with? But I mean, you got a lot, I'm sure you hire brilliant people, which means you got like however many people times brilliant responses, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a potential, you may have already done this, but there's a potential there, especially as a leader or as a founder or as a boss. One of the things that can happen sometimes completely innocently is we forget that we can say, what do y'all think we should do? Like straight up, what do you think we should do? Because I want to keep this rolling. I want to keep this happening. Again, I'm not saying that's you, but it's just a reminder, everyone on the call, when you're in a leadership role, you oftentimes feel like you got to put it on your shoulders. You got to carry the rock. You got to figure it out. But if you have team members, problem solved together.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the questions.
This is Brian Walsh. Yeah. I want to follow up on it. I know we're out of time probably, but real quick, following up on what Mike was talking about with his own example, going with your theme of Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee, I think is the third that are talking about, you know, lifting restrictions. Is quote the go time?
Sorry, Brian, you cut out there a little bit. Can you repeat what you just said?
I just was following up with what Mike said before. Is the go time going to be faster than we think?
Yeah, I'll kind of summarize quickly
because some of these states.
The real-time challenge of video conferencing.
Yeah, exactly. I think I can somewhat summarize for Brian Walsh because I know his Tipio business, and we've been talking about a lot back and forth. And being from Florida, you know, Florida opened beaches, public beaches. And I think Brian's question goes along saying, is the go time about to ramp up? Are we about to start opening with all these, just like, hey, you got to wear this equipment or that? And what does that look like if we do from that? I don't know if that's what Brian Walsh was referring to that, but that's something that's good for the group is like, what happens if we do open, let's say May 15th, right? Since we're all in DC, or majority of us are.
My only reaction to that is, and this is a conversation that I had with another entrepreneur who has been through the dot-com bubble, 9/11, the 2008 crisis, and he's started and run businesses through all of those moments. And we started talking about the recovery curve. So we're talking about sort of like the curve of the virus, the death toll. We're talking about the plateau, right? But what's the recovery curve? It's not going to be a switch. And I think it's different for every business. Right. So my business is consulting. There are elements of my business that have been impacted. There are elements that haven't. There are elements that are actually stronger than before. If you do manufacturing, shipping, logistics, there are a lot of things to consider. But I do think, and this goes back to, and I don't know if he's still on the call, I think Chad, our DC Center for Economic, that whole acronym. Not putting too much pressure on knowing exactly what 12 months out is going to look like, but doing the thought exercise of, okay, if this doesn't change for 3 to 6 months, what is my plan? If we do see a big opening or shift and it's sustainable, what's my capacity and what's my plan? And I'm going to be honest with you, and I think that this is super, super, super important. What's your plan if we start reopening and we get massive whiplash with a virus? And I think that that's in a very important scenario, that if you are starting to think about what next when things loosen up, you have to think about, okay, well, how do we get into recovery mode when, and I'm not dogging Florida, and I hope Florida, everything works well with Florida, but like what happens when everyone goes to the beaches and then like in 2 months, there are like crazy spikes of the virus and just like sad fucking news, how our business is going to deal with that. So I think it's a good question, Brian. And I also think, depending on your business, what resources can you lean on? Are there different distribution channels? Are there moms in another state that might be able to propel your business? Whatever it is, if I'm looking at Michael's question, or if you do gourmet goods, where are you getting your supplies from? I mean, there's so many, to Michael's point, we don't have a crystal ball. So more so than ever, just starting to do some scenario planning and asking yourself, what's the plan if it doesn't change for 3 months? What's the plan if everything goes back to normal in 3 months? What's the plan if we start to go back to normal and we have a huge breakdown, right? And we didn't even get into this, and email me, we can talk on another time. But the actual economic distress isn't going to be completely evident for at least 6+ months, when we really see who stopped paying their mortgages, who stopped paying rent, what restaurants don't come back, what small businesses don't come back. Like we're going to see the damage slowly over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. And that'll have different impacts on all of our businesses and all of our offers. And I don't want to end on a downer. So
and I think I can pull us out. I think, first of all, thank you, Adam, so much for joining us. The very first thing we said on the first call 5 weeks ago, I think holds true, which is that everybody is being called to return to very fundamental business basics. So the business you had before this began no longer exists. And the sooner you can come to terms with that, I think the better off you'll be. Thinking about things like a minimum viable product. When you went to start your business initially, you probably had some iteration of, I'm going to test the market with this and see if people respond to it. I talked to somebody today who he was actually one of the first restaurants to close when a lot of this stuff hit. And he's planning his reopening in a couple of weeks. He avoided the whole delivery and carry out stage. His situation's got a little bit more clear. And what he said to me this afternoon was, look, we have a plan for the first 3 weeks after we open, and we're going to see how it goes. In his case, he wants to balance the staffing needs required to truly put out a minimum viable product, to work out the logistics given the new set of rules that restaurants are facing now, and to see how the customers respond. And this is a guy who has been very successful, multiple locations, that kind of stuff. And he said, look, we have taken a deep breath and we've shrunk down everything. And we are going to take a 3-week runway to see what we have there in today's landscape. And then he's thinking about, all right, a month after that, maybe we can start adding multiple locations and that kind of stuff. But he going back to an MVP, going back to a business model canvas, thinking about your 5 forces, which is what we talked about on the first call. Somebody Google Porter's 5 forces and start thinking about supply chain issues. It's all there. Start thinking about, internal disruptors in your industry versus industry-wide changes of the game. And I think that if the positive here is that everybody is in the absolutely same boat, that if any one of us had to deal with all these issues alone, it would be catastrophic. but the fact that you are able to reshape your business within your industry, no matter what it is, there's an opportunity there. Now, the biggest X factor in all this is the degree to which your business may have received some of the bailout funding that other businesses either did or did not. Because I think that from a true market standpoint, that's going to change some things too. You know, which pizza shop got it, which pizza shop didn't, just for example. But I think that for all of us to take this as inspiration to Chad's point earlier, you know, do people really need our services in the same way they did before all this started? Well, maybe not. But that means there's an opportunity there to figure out what services they do need. And I think that that's a constant that we can all draw from. And hopefully, you know, on our better days, draw inspiration from, I think, to innovate and to come out of this thing, if not stronger, you know, different. And in some cases, I think that trends have been accelerated by what's happening around us. That now there's no question that there are some changes coming, whereas before you may have at least had suspicions that maybe you weren't totally in line with where trends were going. So that's all we have for tonight.
I just say like 100%. I just want to like really double down on like I totally agree with what Brian just said, and this is a great excuse to assess your business and what can it look like. So I had to jump in because I 100% agree.
And then we really could talk all night. Adam and I are a problem. We get hanging out. But the last thing I'll say with regards to reopening, and we used this example last week, I'm using professional sports and even SEC football as my high watermark. We will be totally out of this thing when you can sit shoulder to shoulder with 80,000 other idiots and scream. Your business probably isn't that. Your business probably isn't some totally remote, non-contact business where you don't have to see or interact with anybody. You need to figure out, based on some self-reflection, where on that continuum your business lies. You know, if you're a restaurant, what does it look like when you can only have half as many tables so that they're more spread out, for instance? And so I think that thinking about setting realistic expectations about what your reopening looks like is the first place to start your Phoenix strategy plan. To say, all right, it's not going to be exactly how it was, but let's think about the different gradations between, you know, SEC football land and no contact, and what does my future look like? You know, try to think about not using a crystal ball necessarily, but what sensible ways might they start reopening things, and where does your business fit into that? And then I think that's where you can start to put your plan together, and then, you know, revisit it in a couple of weeks and see if it holds true, which is, I think, the best we can do at this point. The last thing I'd like to do before signing off is, for those that are new to us, please, Rachel just put into the chat, please join our newsletter so you can figure out all these different programs that we have. We will have another happy hour next Monday. We're actually, to Adam's point about reaching out to stakeholders, we're probably going to include a survey later this week just to see what issues you guys would like to talk about, so that we can really meet your needs and continue on. We can bring in all kinds of folks, but we wanted to hear from you. And thank you once again to Adam Mutschler. As expected, I think you gave a great perspective of nimble thinking and also positive thinking as we all look to adjust our businesses to not necessarily the new reality, but what's best for us and our businesses as business owners and as folks who are responsible for our employees. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And hope to see you next week.